There are 4 foods sitting in your fridge right now that millions of people reheat every single day without a second thought, and at least one of them can make you seriously sick within hours, while another slowly builds up compounds your body was never designed to process in large amounts. I'm not going to tell you to throw out your leftovers. I'm going to tell you exactly what happens at a biological level when you microwave that container of rice, that plate of spinach, those mushrooms, or that pan of leftover fried food. And by the end of this video, you're going to look at your fridge completely differently. Stick around, because food number 3 on this list surprised even me when I first read the research, and I promise you've done it this week. Let's start with the one that sends more people to urgent care than almost any other reheating mistake, and it's not even close: rice. If you've ever cooked a big batch of rice, left it sitting on the counter while you ate dinner, and then put the leftovers in the fridge an hour or 2 later, you may have already set yourself up for trouble before you even reheated a single grain. Here's why. Raw rice can carry spores of a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. These spores are incredibly hardy. They survive the boiling and steaming process that cooks the rice because spores are basically bacteria in hibernation mode, wrapped in a protective shell that can shrug off heat that would kill a normal bacterial cell. Once the rice is cooked and starts cooling down on your counter, those spores wake up. And between about room temperature and body temperature, they multiply fast, releasing a toxin as they go. Now here's the part that catches people off guard, and this is genuinely one of those facts that changes how you cook forever once you know it. Reheating does not save you. You can nuke that rice until it's steaming hot, and it will not matter, because the toxin Bacillus cereus produces is heat stable. It survives the microwave completely intact. So if that rice sat out on your counter for 3 or 4 hours before it ever made it into the fridge, you could reheat it perfectly and still end up doubled over with vomiting and cramps a few hours later. This is actually so well documented in food safety circles that it has its own nickname, fried rice syndrome, because it shows up so often in cases involving Chinese takeout rice left out overnight. The fix is almost boringly simple. Get rice into the fridge within about an hour or 2 of cooking it, not after it's been sitting out through an entire meal and cleanup. That one habit alone eliminates most of the risk before reheating ever becomes a factor. And speaking of habits that quietly work against you, before we get to food number 2, I want you to think for a second about how many of your own kitchen habits you've never actually questioned. If this is the kind of thing that makes you want to rethink what's in your fridge right now, drop a comment telling me which one surprised you most, because I read every single one and it genuinely shapes what I cover next. Food number 2 is one that health-conscious people actually get wrong more often than anyone else, which is a little ironic: leafy greens, especially spinach. Spinach is one of the most nitrate-rich vegetables you can eat, and normally that's a good thing. Nitrates from vegetables get converted in your body into nitric oxide, which helps blood vessels relax and can support healthy blood pressure. But here's where reheating changes the equation. When spinach sits around after it's been cooked, especially if it's left at room temperature for a while or reheated more than once, naturally occurring bacteria and enzymes can convert some of those nitrates into nitrites. And nitrites themselves aren't the villain either. The concern is more specific than that. Under certain conditions, particularly when nitrites are exposed to heat alongside proteins, they can form compounds called nitrosamines, a class of chemicals that has been studied for its association with certain cancers, most notably in the context of processed and cured meats like bacon and hot dogs, where nitrite additives are common. To be clear here, because I don't want to overstate this, a single reheated portion of spinach is not going to give you cancer. And the research on home-cooked vegetable leftovers is nowhere near as alarming as some corners of the internet make it sound. This isn't a never eat leftover spinach situation, but the pattern that food safety researchers actually recommend is straightforward. Cook only what you'll eat, refrigerate leftover greens quickly, and try to reheat them just once rather than repeatedly cycling the same container in and out of the microwave over several days. It's less about panic and more about not stacking the odds against yourself for no reason. Now, food number 3 is the one I mentioned at the start, and I'd bet almost everyone watching this has done it in just the last 7 days without thinking twice: mushrooms. Mushrooms are unusual among vegetables because of how much protein they contain relative to other plants. And protein-rich foods are exactly the kind of environment where bacteria thrive once you start cycling temperatures up and down. Cook mushrooms, let them cool, refrigerate, reheat, maybe reheat again the next day. Every one of those temperature swings is another opportunity for bacterial growth on the surface, particularly if the mushrooms weren't cooled quickly after the first cooking. The protein structure in mushrooms also breaks down and changes each time you reheat them, which is part of why day-old reheated mushrooms often taste rubbery or slightly off compared to fresh. That's not just a texture complaint, it's actually a signal that the protein composition has shifted. The practical takeaway isn't to avoid mushroom leftovers entirely. It's to eat them within a day, store them properly sealed and chilled quickly after cooking, and give reheated mushrooms a genuinely thorough reheat, steaming hot all the way through, not just warm, rather than a quick 30-second zap that leaves the middle lukewarm. And that 30-second zap habit is actually the perfect segue into food number 4, because this is the one with the most serious research behind it, and it's not really about the food itself, it's about what you cooked it in. Reused cooking oil. If you've ever fried something, strained the oil, and saved it in a jar to fry with again, and again, and again, this is the part you need to hear. Every time oil is heated to frying temperatures, it undergoes a chemical process called oxidation. The fat molecules break down and reform into new compounds, some of which are genuinely concerning from a health standpoint. Repeatedly heated oil accumulates what are called oxidized lipids, and depending on the oil and the temperature, compounds like acrylamide and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, can increase with each reuse cycle. PAHs in particular are a well-studied category of compounds, some of which are classified as probable or possible human carcinogens based on both animal studies and epidemiological research, looking at high-exposure occupational settings and diets very heavy in repeatedly fried and charred foods. This is the reheating mistake that actually has the most robust science behind a real long-term risk. Not because one reheated meal is dangerous, but because oil degradation is cumulative. Restaurants that reuse frying oil dozens of times without properly filtering or replacing it are a bigger concern here than your home kitchen. But if you're someone who saves and reuses frying oil at home repeatedly, especially oil that's gone cloudy, dark, foamy, or has a burnt smell, that's a signal the oil has broken down chemically, not just cosmetically. The general guidance from food scientists is to limit how many times you reuse frying oil, store it properly away from light and heat between uses, and retire it once it starts changing color, smell, or texture, rather than stretching it as far as it will physically go. So let's zoom out for a second, because I promised you at the start that your fridge was going to look different by the end of this. And here's the actual pattern running underneath all 4 of these. It's almost never the reheating itself that's the real danger. It's what happened to the food before it went back into the microwave or the pan. Rice that sat out too long, greens that cycled through too many temperature swings, mushrooms that weren't cooled and reheated properly, oil that was pushed through cycle after cycle past the point it should have been thrown out. Reheating isn't some mysterious cancer-causing act on its own, it's more like a magnifying glass. It reveals and sometimes amplifies mistakes that were already made earlier in the food's life, back at the cooling, storage, and handling stage. Once you see that pattern, you stop needing to memorize a scary list of forbidden foods, and you start just handling everything a little better by default. And if this is the kind of video that's actually going to change something in your kitchen this week, that's honestly the entire reason I make these. So hit like on your way out. It genuinely helps this reach more people who are about to make the same rice mistake you almost made before watching this. Now, I do want to leave you with something practical, because knowing the why behind all this is only half the value. The other half is what you actually do differently starting tonight. Here's the version of all this that's easy to actually remember and use. Get hot food into the fridge within about 2 hours of cooking it, not after it's sat through dinner, dishes, and a movie. Store leftovers in shallow containers rather than one deep pot, because shallow containers cool faster all the way through, which matters more than people realize. A deep pot of rice or soup can stay in that bacterial danger zone for hours even sitting in the fridge, because the center takes so long to actually chill. When you reheat, go for steaming hot all the way through, not just warm on the surface. That microwave habit of stirring halfway through and checking the middle actually matters. And with oil, treat it the way you'd treat anything else that degrades with use. Give it a limited number of reuses, watch for the warning signs of color, smell, and foaming, and don't be afraid to just start fresh. None of this means living in fear of your own leftovers. Humans have been reheating food for as long as we've had fire, and your fridge is not secretly plotting against you. It just means understanding the handful of situations where the biology and the chemistry actually stack the odds against you, so you can sidestep them without even thinking about it after a while, the same way you already don't think twice about washing your hands before you cook. If you want to go even deeper on this, I actually did a full breakdown on food storage temperatures and exactly how fast bacteria multiply in what's called the danger zone. The number is honestly a lot faster than most people guess. And once you see the graph of bacterial growth over time, you'll never leave leftovers on the counter just for a bit again. That video is going to make a lot more sense now that you understand the mechanisms behind today's 4 foods. So go watch that one next, and hit subscribe while you're at it, because this channel is entirely built around taking the stuff you think you already know about food and cooking and showing you what's actually happening underneath it. I'll see you in the next one.